are talking Freeze, and this is by creature feature director Charlie Steeds, who is a low-budget British filmmaker who loves a creature feature. He's made vampire movies, he's made werewolf movies, he's made mutant movies, but now he turns his attention to a kind of Gillman style creature. Now this is actually a period piece, and it focuses on an old-time wind-blown ship which is travelling to the Arctic to try and rescue a previous vessel which seemingly has kind of disappeared, and its crew there are, you know, worried about the potential dangers of getting kind of frozen in the ice, etc. And inevitably that's what happens. They discover there is a stowaway on board, this kind of woman who may have connections to the kind of the previous ship that has gone missing, and now they must contend with the kind of the fact that they are potentially frozen in ice and can't get home and may well die out there. But that's actually only the beginning of their problems, because there is in fact a race of humanoid fishmen that are out, have come up from the depths and have a taste for human flesh, and that might not even be the only danger. Now what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with the movie Freeze. So as I say, Charlie Steeds is the man behind this, and he's a fairly prolific director. You know, he's not quite the Scott Jeffrey level here, but you know, he churns out kind of a good few movies, and I will say, for the most part, I've quite enjoyed a lot of Charlie Steeds' work, and you know, he does seem to have a little bit more attention to detail and have a little bit more kind of going on in his films than a lot of these kind of like low-budget indie movies. It just seems to come out and it's a bunch of girls getting, you know, chased by a masked killer, etc. So you know, his films have been a little bit more complex in regards to kind of plot, a little bit more world building and things like this. And you know, how does this one stack up? Well, like I've said, you know, this one is a period piece, so you have that kind of that historical kind of factor, which kind of gives it this kind of interesting aesthetic. You know, I think the costuming here is all kind of very good. The thing that stands out to me the most, however, is some fabulous on-location shooting in these kind of like these icy plains that really does give it a cinematic feel. We see a reasonable amount of shots that are kind of filmed down this kind of this. Not quite sure where they were filmed, but they're at somewhere where it's clearly you know, a frozen wasteland, and it looks very, very cinematic. And I have to say, I really kind of enjoyed those sequences, and they felt you know, particularly strong. Gave this movie you know, a much kind of like needed cinematic feel to it. I have to say I quite liked our creature designs, and there is more that can be done with them, I feel. I'm going to come on to that, but when you're looking at it just on kind of like the aesthetics, these creature designs are kind of quite fun. They kind of, you know, they look pretty, you know, familiar in regards to, if you're familiar with like the Gillman kind of style creature, humanoids from the deep, that kind of thing. I thought they were quite a fun design, and we've seen them on screen quite a lot. I thought our captain, who's an enjoyable kind of character. For a while I wasn't quite sure who the main character was supposed to be, but I have to say I quite liked this captain. I thought he gave a, you know, a fun character, and the performance was pretty good with him as well. And in regards to kind of plot, there is a little bit more kind of going on than just creatures on the loose. And as I said, I do think one of the kind of the benefits of having these Charlie Steeds movies and his team is they don't tend to just go for a, you know, a very basic plot. There's normally a little more wrinkles that are kind of folded in regards to plot dynamics and things like that, and that's true of this film as well. So it gives it a little bit more kind of going on for the kind of a narrative sense, which obviously I kind of appreciate. And like I've said, I do think there's an attempt to kind of have this world building, the kind of the names of the characters, the costuming, the kind of like the manner of you know, the attitudes and things like that towards these other women, for example, and kind of the way they speak. So there's an attempt here to have it as an interesting kind of historical period piece, and the effects pretty good. Like I've said, even kind of some of the kind of like the effects of the ship, and we kind of see it in the distance and things like that, pretty good. What doesn't work for me? I have to say, this movie tends to be a little bit talky, I have to say. Now, if you're expecting a full-on creature feature, you do see these kind of creatures quite a lot. But I would kind of liken them to stormtroopers in Star Wars. They're there, and they are a kind of a threat, but you never really feel like they're the kind of the main threat of the story, so to speak. We have another kind of character who really is the kind of the impetus of what's kind of going on. and these Gillman sort of style creatures are really kind of the foot soldiers. And although we do see a few kills with them, you know, you feel like they're never really the main threat in a way. They're kind of more of just a means to an end for something else or someone else. We never see the creatures in the water. In fact, we don't see any water at all. It's only ever ice. So it's a little bit of a strange choice in a way to have kind of fishermen, because we never really see them in water. I think, again, that could have been an opportunity to explore some more. So, you know, it takes away some of that tension. And on the same subject of the kind of the Gillmen, I have to say I think they were somewhat clumsily introduced. To me, these are the creatures. This is what people are going to be watching this film for, if you ask me. And they're just going to turn up. There's no real kind of building up of what could be out there. You know, we don't quite see things straight away. You know, they just bam straight away. We sort of more or less kind of see it in all their kind of glory. You don't get it in the fact that there's something kind of stalking. You're not quite sure what it is. Well, obviously we know because we've seen the cover. But, you know, in the film sense, it's like, you know, there's lots of build up there. And they just seem to be kind of like, you know, obviously guys in suits that are kind of like writhing around and stuff. And that brings me to my next issue with them, is that I think they're somewhat overlit at times. I mean, the cinematography here is a mixed bag, because I quite like the external shots. I think they're done very well. But some of the internal shots are poorly handled to a degree. I think, again, this is a critique I've had with some of the other Charlie Steeds movies. You know, sometimes it's worth keeping your kind of your antagonists, especially their monsters, in the darkness to a certain degree, and kind of build up that mystique. And I would have thought this movie would have benefited from having a slower introduction, where you're kind of maybe seeing parts of them, or that it's more hinted at they're there, but no, they're just kind of there in full kind of daylight. And then we kind of get like these fairly well lit scenes with these kind of guys in suits, kind of like, you know, almost like they're dancing to a certain degree, and it kind of undercuts that kind of the fear that could have been, you know, really kind of produced for having them built up in a different way. The acting is a mixed bag. I think Charlie Steeds tends to use the same actors in all of his films, or at least a few of them. And some of these actors have a tendency to overact. I would feel it would benefit from to Mr. Steeds to maybe kind of change up some of these actors to a degree. Some are okay. Some of them have a tendency to kind of overact. Some of the dialogue here is a little clunky. I know it's meant to be a kind of a period piece, so people will kind of talk in a certain manner, but nonetheless, I still feel there is some kind of clunky dialogue. I think the internal sequences are they're a little bit kind of, as I say, the cinematography isn't great, and there is a few kind of flubs here and there. We'll have a sequence, for example, we'll go into the ship, which is kind of at a slant, and we'll see a character in one hallway, for example, you know, having to brace himself because, you know, the boat's obviously at a slant, so everything's kind of like at a 45-degree angle, and he'll go into a room which should be at the same angle, and it's dead flat and things like that. The movie, I say, tends to focus a little bit more too much on the kind of the human characters, and I feel doesn't play up the kind of the monsters enough. You do see them on screen a lot, but they're more just kind of like backup. They almost seem like backup dancers to this kind of other threat that's kind of there. And to me, that was a bit of a mistake. I get that you maybe want to have that, and it's one of the elements that I like, is you have a little bit more of a wrinkle, but I feel like it undercuts these kind of creatures and their kind of the threats that they possess, really. So, you know, it seems like they could have been done more with that. I think at least I would have liked to have seen these kind of creatures presented in a more of a horror fashion, kind of keeping them more in dialogue, have a slower kind of introduction, build them up a little bit more before kind of the reveal, and maybe have them a little bit more sort of forefront, a little bit more kind of like close calls and things like that. But it doesn't really do that in favour of the good old talking in rooms time filler that these kind of low budget movies kind of sometimes do. It's not a bad movie, you know. It's like I've said, this one has bags of ambition, and I do think Steeds does create some interesting kind of worlds that you know, there's a few misses on, but there are a few things that I think you have to compliment them on, the team, you know. But yeah, it's ultimately a watchable film, but it's not particularly kind of super strong in any kind of means. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.